I appreciate all of you coming out. It's a great forum. Destiny and Steve have provided for us to share our works. My name is Miles Merritt, originally from New York, but I've been out of there a long time. Been in New Mexico with my wife Gail for about 14 years, the last 10 of which have been in Santa Fe. So I'm going to share some of my poems with you tonight. The first one is entitled The Painting, and I guess it hopefully speaks for itself. Strange how some in unimaginable darkness can ascertain dimension, not merely shape. Stranger yet how others can distill forgiveness from betrayal, injustice, or neglect. There is an urge to uncover merit in each moment, though often camouflaged by anguish or by loss. A capacity to see beyond the dreary plot at hand, a more profound and verdant landscape. How I ache to have that power, as if with a few skillful brushstrokes of the mind, to refashion all my petty grievances into one resplendent canvas, to somehow find the beauty of it all. Last week, zigzagging through this city in a cab, we whirled around a corner past a woman who stood before a meager home, extending her arm upward to water some hanging plants outside. She was bronze and lovely in her summer dress, and in that ephemeral instant, I could envision her as in a painting by Degas, a ballerina on point, head angled back, pink geraniums spilling over her nimble wrists, a striking figure of unintended grace, with the fraught visage of one who clings to hope against all odds, or simply against a blunt, unyielding backdrop of brick and stone. Thank you. This next poem is called No Wind for the Sails. Thank you. Aside from the curious stillness in the air, a rather typical afternoon on a small suburban street in Santa Monica, as I sat outside my garden apartment on a tiny patch of grassy lawn that looked more like a green post-it on the pavement. Oleanders were flowering madly, while ambling distractedly down the block, holding the fingertips of one hand to his chin, apparently in deep reflection, appeared my neighbor Phil, a scholarly schizophrenic, who between intermittent binges could recite by heart the histories of several empires, not to mention which painting hung in what museum by whom, who now wafted toward me like a ghost, and glancing warily about began to mutter softly, "You see, the problem is there's no wind for the sails." Then continued drifting down the street as if he himself was some disoriented vessel slowly vanishing beyond the blue horizon line. For years I've often wondered what he meant. Perhaps how those gusts of passion that propel us in our youth can almost imperceptibly subside and leave us stranded and strangely aching. But the reason I mention all this now is simply that star I watched this evening, shimmering like a distant flare, and how it reminds me of my mother. Today, the 5th anniversary of her passing, and I still recall that moment when they called me in to view the body, her thin arms hanging motionless at her side, her face bereft of all free will but acquiescence. How lost she looked inside that casket, as if astray upon some narrow craft, encircled by gently rippling waves of silk. No wind, truly, for the sails, but maybe just an errant breeze to lift her up there now amid unfathomable swells of darkness. Her struggle over, alone, adrift, at long last, unafraid. This next one was written when I was living in California, and it's called The Great Escape. Here I am again, sitting at the breakfast table, a trained monkey with his cereal and banana, the same breakfast I've eaten every morning for a quarter century or so, and casually thumbing through a copy of the LA Times, when I come upon this blurb: a white male, 40-ish, balding, and, this is the peculiar part, utterly naked, sprinting down a runway at LAX, flapping his arms blissfully up and down, was apprehended by authorities, handcuffed, and quickly whisked away for psychological evaluation. And suddenly, here comes that old familiar melancholy, settling over me like a heavy fog, as I pause to dab some milk off my mustache and slowly set the paper down. It seems this world would brand all dreamers as insane, and here I sit, brooding, spineless, and chronically perplexed, unable to restrain the hint of envy that I feel, this inherent link to whatever that man was fleeing from. If only they had showed up several seconds later, say, slightly after liftoff, their cars coming to a screeching halt just as he was climbing out over the Pacific and up into the white spray of cumulus, the sun reflecting off his pale and portly haunch. Just him now, flying solo into that vast expanse of silence, his time-worn labors left behind. A giddy little cherub in search of some place for a gentle landing, a place where no one sits at any table in the morning pondering that nagging urge for purpose. And as the sun begins to slip into the thin slot of the horizon and millions of silver stars jingle out across the sky, he will circle until he catches sight of some slight opening in the firmament, a narrow strip that I imagine leads to heaven, where a host of resident angels will be waiting to receive him, waving hallowed candles in the darkness, trying patiently to guide him safely in. This next one is called One Night Stand, and One Night Stand for Rhonda. A little bit trashy, early 20s, the black roots of her hair fanning out atop her flowing golden mane like the early stages of an oil spill. Built well, though, with cat-gray eyes. She even, I discovered later, had a small tattoo behind one shoulder, a rose perhaps, or a chrysanthemum. Chain smoke to boot, an instant turn-off nowadays, but back then, hormones raging, she could have smoked explosives for all I cared. A receptionist at an office where I'd come sometimes to meet with clients, her smile more salacious than well-bred. So one day, I asked her out to dinner. Casual conversation, dining slowly, the wine soon worked its magic, and when the check arrived, we hit the streets like bloodhounds on a mission. A measured stride into torrid heat, into some grassy condo complex, where after kicking off her heels, she led me by the hand to a private moonlit pond. All at once she pulled me close and kissed me with such fervor as if I had just rescued her from the smoldering rubble of some imploded building. Our clothes shed quickly, we rolled upon damp earth, no stopping now. I might have even laughed, but for her urgency, the disconcerting gravity of her sighing. We both knew this was only for one night, so I could not fathom her crazed delight. But years later, after I had moved away, I learned Rhonda had committed suicide. How anonymously the fragile often move among us, like these murky shadows that slowly shift across my room tonight. How often we fail to see the signs. Yet, in this darkness, I still feel her heartbeat, her impenetrable moan, as if it were the ocean's drone inside a shell. A fitful ocean, where poor Rhonda, agape with fear and yearning, once clung desperately to the slippery buoy of my flesh. One more failed lifeline before her slow descent beneath the surface. Let's see. This is an unusual theme for a poem, not something that I suppose you read too much. It's called Love Note to My Ex-Wife. I need for you to call me late one night and whisper right-wing politics in your seductive southern drawl. Wake me as you always used to do, not with a kiss, but a command, or some complaint of how I've disappointed you. I can't deny the way you still entice me, so repeat my hair would look much neater shorter. My mustache means I must be hiding something. Murmur tantalizingly across the wires how my poetry might be more admired if I wrote less frequently of death, and less especially of other women. Yes, you alone have the know-how to excite me, so coax me yet again to ditch my useless aspirations and devote my life exclusively to pleasing you. And if by chance I am still not yet all aroused, then fondle me with the notion that my friends are all frivolous and false-hearted, my family an assortment of buffoons. I beseech you, please, call quickly. I need you to sweet-talk me to my senses. For tonight, the sea of logic is at low tide, and the defenseless fool I have become can feel that ferocious undertow of nostalgia dragging me out towards you once again. And the last one is called Snapshot. Some of you may be familiar with the town San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. This was written in that town. The center of the town, there's a plaza called El Jardín. It's kind of where everything starts. All the action starts. It's like the nucleus of San Miguel. It's a wonderful place to just sit and watch people and musicians and everything. So this was written there, and it's called Snapshot. A young man sits with his beloved on a bench in El Jardín, stroking her hair adoringly, collecting thick curls of it against his face like a cluster of exotic flora, caressing it, kissing it, inhaling it, lost inside the sweep of it. He decides this phenomenon is worth a photograph, so he rises, gathers up a flowing heap of it in one hand, and spawns an auburn avalanche as he shifts it lovingly to one side, having now composed a perfect frame. The faint, alluring smile on her lips, her body quivering with anticipated passion, as if this plaza was some secluded meadow and it was just she and he alone. And here's where I come in, the master of the mistimed step, straying absent-mindedly into this scene just as he pronounces smile, his finger lightly pressing down the shutter. They might not have seen me then, But surely when this image returns to life, they will observe an unexpected flaw on the periphery, a somewhat out-of-focus shape intruding on their private moment. Then it will be up to the illusionists to execute their skillful sleight of hand, to purge me from this otherwise exquisite portrait by means of some elaborate software, or simply cropping me from the edge until one would hardly guess I'd ever been there in the first place. As all of us, positioned so arbitrarily in the panorama, will indeed one day be deleted, incidental figures that we are, from this rushed snapshot we call a lifetime, whose borders are perpetually shrinking inward. Thank you. Thank you very much.